Hey. Oh, there we go. All right, we're here. Holy fuck. Shit. So, how's it going, everybody? We got we got research to do because one topic that I am lacking on info on is mutualism. I've read some Proudhon, but not much, honestly. So I've got that pulled up. I've got mutual aid pulled up and gift economy pulled up because we're researching a few things today. So, cool. But we're going to start with mutualism. And there's a reason for this. Mostly because I've got a discussion coming up with a Boogaloo boy. Somebody who apparently, according to them, are in contact with like Boogaloo boy leadership quite frequently. Mutualism is an anarchist school of thought and economic theory that advocates a socialist society based on free markets. And okay, well, that's not really what a free market actually. You can't actually have a free market in that sense. Jesus Christ. So there's that hierarchy there, and use of Frooks. Not what I wanted. Use of Frooks is either granted in or held in common ownership as long as the property is not damaged or destroyed. The third civilian property interest is the right to alienate the thing possessed either by consuming or destroying it, e.g., for profit. Okay, so no profit. That's but it's got the right to derive a profit. Right to derive profit from a thing possessed by transferring it to someone else. Okay, someone enjoying all three rights has full ownership. Okay. Okay. Usufructuary does not own the property but does have an interest in it, which is sanctioned or contractually allowed by the owner. That's still a system fucking hierarchy. Okay. Should probably actually read the whole thing though. Two different systems of usufruct exist, perfect and imperfect. In a perfect usufruct, the usufructuary is entitled the use of the property but cannot substantially change it. For example, an owner of a small business may become ill and grant the right of usufruct to an individual to run their business. Usufructuary thus has the right to operate the business and gain income from it, but does not have the right to, for example, tear down the business and replace it or to sell it. The imperfect usufruct system gives the usufructuary some ability to modify the property. For example, if a landowner grants a piece of land to a usufructuary for agricultural use, the usufructuary may have the right to not only grow crops on the land, but also make improvements that would help in farming, say by building a barn. However, this can be disadvantageous to the usufructuary. The usufructuary makes material improvements, such as a building or fixtures attached to the building or other fixed structures to the usufruct. They do not own the improvements, and any money spent on these improvements would belong to the original owner at the end of the usufruct. lifetime, the holder of a usufruct has the right to use the property and enjoy its fruits. In modern terms, this more or less corresponds to the profits one may make as when selling the fruits, both in literal and figurative senses of the landlord leasing a house. Leasing, no. Fruits refers to any renewable commodity. Abolition of commodity is a thing on the property, including, among others, actual fruits, livestock, and even rental payments. Rent, no. These may be divided into civil, industrial, and natural fruits, the latter of which in Roman law included. Oh. Okay. Um, Unlike the owner, the usufructuary did not have a right of alienation, but he could sell or lease his usufructuary interest. Even though the usufructuary did not have possessory title, he could sue for relief in form of a modified possessory interdict prohibiting order. Okay, well, how would that even work under a stateless society? You wouldn't really be able to do that. Okay, but this is still really. Okay, that's a usufruct. Had to reply to the landlord real quick. I fucking hate rent, by the way. While mutualism was popularized by the writings of anarchist philosopher Pierre-Joseph Proudhon and is mainly associated as an anarchist school of thought and with libertarian socialism, which, its origin as a type of socialism goes back to the 18th century labor movement in Britain first, then France, and finally the working class Chartist movement. Mutualists are opposed to individuals receiving income through loans. Yep, that's fine. I'm against loans. Investments, I'm against that. And rent under capitalist social relations. I'm against capitalist social relations as a general thing. I'm completely opposed to landlords, so rent is out. I don't like the stock market, so that's out. And loans are predatory. Although personally opposed to this type of income, Proudhon expressed that he had never intended to forbid or suppress by sovereign decree ground rent and interest on capital. I think all these manifestations of human activity should remain free and voluntary for all. No. I ask for them no modifications, restrictions, or suppressions other than those which result naturally and of necessity from the universalization of the principle of reciprocity which I propose. Okay, so no, there probably does need to be some things done. This is where Proudhon loses following with me. I'm gonna tell you right now. As long as they ensure the workers' right to the full product of their labor, mutualists support markets and property in the product of labor, differentiating between capitalist private property, which is productive property, and personal property, private property, which I recognize this distinction. However, I'm going to point out no. Like, there are elements of mutualism that I can agree with, but no. Mutualists argue for conditional titles to land. Nope. Whose ownership is legitimate only so. How can you determine the legitimacy of something without a state? Please. Only so long as it remains in use or occupation, which Proudhon called possession. A type of private property with strong abandonment criteria. is this something that you want, that you argue for while capitalism is a thing, while you push to abolish it, or what? Because if that's just what you want, is conditional titles to land, who upholds your title? Who issues your title? Is it the workers' council? Because then that makes them into just a regular government instead of just working to try and make sure that the economy is functioning. Because I mean, your workers' council, you could elect somebody, a delegate, to send to meetings. Like, okay, an issue is brought up, something, hey, this is going to be a thing. What are we going to do about it? All of you talk about it. You come to a decision as a group. You send your delegate with your decision as a group to meet with the other delegates of the other syndicates. They meet, they talk it out, they come back with their revised proposals. Y'all talk about it again until y'all come to a general agreement, and then you send back what you want there and see if they. And yes, it's a slower process, but guess what? Everybody will be happier. As libertarian socialists, mutualists distinguish their market socialism from state socialism and do not advocate state ownership of the means of production. Good. Instead, each person possesses a means of production, either individually or collectively, with trade representing equivalent amounts of labor in the free market. Benjamin Tucker wrote of Proudhon that though opposed to socializing the ownership of capital, he aimed nevertheless to socialize its effects by making its use beneficial to all instead of a means of impoverishing the many to enrich the few. By subjecting capital to the natural law of competition, thus bringing the price of its own use down to cost. That's It's not really how money works, though. Capital doesn't. Okay. A natural law of competition. That's no. That's not how that works. Although similar to the economic doctrines of 19th century American individualist anarchists, mutualism is in favor of large industries, which I am not. Mutualism has been retrospectively characterized sometimes as being a form of individualist anarchism and as ideologically situated between individualist and collectivist forms of anarchism as well. Proudhon himself described the liberty he pursued as the synthesis of communism and property, which, bro, what? Some consider mutualism to be part of free market anarchism, individualist anarchism, and market oriented left libertarianism, while others regard it to be part of social anarchism. Charles Fourier was not to an economic system. The first use of the noun mutualist was in New Harmony Gazette. Hey, Froge, I am researching mutualism because I know very little about it. I haven't read much Proudhon or mutualist theory or anything, and I'm trying to figure it out. I actually have a discussion coming up with a Boogaloo boy because I got into a kerfluffle on Twitter where an anarchist said that Boog boys aren't anarchists, they're fascists, and I concurred. And a bunch of them tried to jump on me for it. And one of them actually, they're like, "Oh no, I'm not a fascist," and like 2 minutes later, they're sitting there doing the fucking honk honk bullshit at me. I'm like, "Oh okay, yeah, I see where that is." So I'm trying to do some research on mutualism because the yep, mutualism. The person I talked to said that they were in contact regularly with people like Magnus Panvidya and leadership of the Boogaloo Boys, and that they're constantly like fighting fascists and stuff. But I don't know. I've seen contradicting information with them like working with Proud Boys, and then there's pictures of them fighting Proud Boys. So I don't know. Although mutualism is generally associated with anarchism, it is not necessarily anarchist. And okay, yeah. See, I personally don't think that mutualism is something that lets you identify yourself as an anarchist. Like it's just not a thing. But his writing shows a lecture by Jason Stain. Are you sending it through Discord or on Twitter? I'm gonna check Twitter first because that's. Oh, hey, there it is. Nope, nope. That's a group chat. Skullman, big bad. Check the co-op. Oh, what the fuck, Skullman? When a perfectly average dude reads too much 4chan and fucks up his brain to where he thinks he will never be loved because of some bizarre shit like jawbone angles or whatever. I like that. That's my guilty pleasure. It's bad. I know it's bad. That's why it's a guilty pleasure instead of just a pleasure. Okay, so it's like Schadenfreude shit. He likes seeing people who are fucked up because of 4chan feeling bad about themselves. That is not good. That is really bad, actually. The more I think about it, the worse it gets. Initial reaction is that that's like a guilty pleasure. It's not good, but does it really do harm to anybody? But him stating it out loud like that definitely causes harm. Yeah, seems bad. God. 669 likes on that. That is fucked. Okay. Lone Gun AFA. Ooh. Add to bookmarks. Let's go with choose another folder. New folder. Research for discussion. Skullman just he says the worst shit on Twitter. As Vaush said, he tweets like an alt writer with the Pepe posting and shit. Okay. Froge, you are a fucking My name is you are a godsend with this shit. You're getting the double hearts on those. Thank you so much. Anyways, let's get back into mutualism real quick, and then I'm gonna pull up this article, which is let me just go ahead and look over things. There's, okay, there's a the pan flag black sun, another black sun. Okay, Jesus with a gun. I'm not too worried about. Okay. With this message, they try and say that okay, please observe how the same memes appear in both the deepest Nazi boogaloo figure 2 channels. Oh, okay. This is and the okay, so this is the Nazi thing. Okay, yeah, but they got the black sun there. Wait, hold on. Oh my god. Okay, hold on. I'm getting distracted by looking through this. Wow. Wow. Okay. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Yeah. Oh, he's friends with Rome? Oh god. Okay. That's all I need. That is literally all I fucking need. Oh yeah, it's Vaush versus Charlie Kirk. Fuck.
Depends
for these vaccines.
I wanted to add, just based on what you had said, I can pull up Reuters. Their fact check is that vaccines are not, quote, cytotoxic. They go on to mention that Robert Malone, and they show the Brett Weinstein podcast, they show the post, the FDA was alerted months ago that the spike protein in the COVID vaccines are cytotoxic, toxic to cells. The FDA did nothing.
Okay, this is super important because it's Vaush versus Charlie Kirk, Tim Pool, and some other conservative.
You said, do you trust Fauci or Weinstein? I don't know if there is a fact-based argument if you have the doctors you trust and the doctors you trust or the organizations you trust. It's a clash of who you believe, to be honest.
None of us have the credentials to just come up with these arguments on their own. There will always be bias in who we choose to believe. However, given the plurality of people seem to support the safety and the effectiveness of the vaccine, and the fact that it doesn't take a virologist to notice that over 500,000 Americans have died of COVID, more than the combined death tolls of every war since World War I combined, including the Second World War in Vietnam. Those are things that I don't need to be a virologist to see. I can see it
Can I ask
happening.
you a question,
That's
though?
pretty bad.
One of the issues that's brought up frequently, especially on Twitter, is that many of these COVID deaths are died with COVID, as it's brought up, where people would say something like it tends to be people who are over 70 or things like that. I'm only bringing that up not to make the argument, but because you said, how would VAERS know if these are actually related to the vaccine?
I'd love to respond to that if I may.
Yeah, absolutely.
So COVID rarely, directly kills you. Like
No, I will,
age,
though.
It causes a breakdown in other vital functions that then their death can be attributed to such. So, for example, of the many things that people die, it's not really COVID. It's just that COVID blanks their entire system internally, and eventually something fails, something breaks, and they die. There were people claiming that there were deaths being spuriously attributed to COVID-19 very early on in this pandemic, but thankfully we know that's not the case, because if you take a look at the excess mortality numbers, the number of people who should die every year in the United States, because there's a very normal pattern, normally with this many people in this country, we see an excess, starting when COVID started, that almost perfectly graphs on to the rising death waves of COVID. I mean, it perfectly tracks onto that.
I just want to say for you, Charlie, I think, the issue I see here is, for me, I can't trust or distrust. I don't know. I think Brett Weinstein's a very smart guy, and I don't think he's going to lie to me. And these doctors are very smart people. And then I see the government agencies that, I don't always trust the government, to be completely honest. I'm not a big fan. But to believe that there's like a nefarious effort or anything like that, ultimately what it comes down to is, in my opinion, having a trusted medical professional that you can consult with.
Well, I totally agree. And I think there could be an argument that if you're over the age of 70, that this vaccine might be a really good idea for you. However, to mandate it for schools and for colleges, when these are highly complex medical decisions, that's where I'm going to push back against it.
Well, real
rather
quick,
complex
let me point
They are
out, though,
complex
the
medical
Johnson &
decisions.
Johnson vaccine is not an mRNA vaccine, though. Is that's my understanding?
I
It's
don't
an
want to
MMR?
speak out of turn.
I believe so.
Yeah,
I
I
would
think
love to be
that's right.
fact-checked on that.
I'm not totally sure.
My memory is
So
faulty.
I guess another question I have, what do you think of alternative type treatments, hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin? Why the push for mass inoculation?
Well, because hydroxychloroquine studies have found it largely ineffective. There was, I believe, a French study that stopped when people started dying of heart failure. I think the only reason the right dies in this hill is because Trump mentioned it. I don't think
Jesus
it'd be a push
Christ.
for it otherwise.
Yeah.
The vaccines are the
This is
effective
true.
way of getting mass populations inoculated. And while it is true that most of the people who die are ancient, the fact remains that people experience long-term side effects from getting COVID, even if they survive.
I like how Charlie Kirk doesn't try and interrupt Vaush, and it's because of that smooth voice. He has a very smooth voice, and when he speaks, it just comes out. And even if he stumbles over his words a little bit, and he has to do the thing like this, then it still comes out very smooth and fairly professional.
I know people who are in their 30s, and me, a blistering 27-year-old myself, I'm not especially worried, but I've heard them talk about how much harder it is for them to climb up flights of stairs. I know that erectile dysfunction, fellas, is one of the listed potential side effects of getting COVID. Even young, healthy, no other problems. It is true that death is most comorbid with age and pre-existing conditions, but still, and that's not even to speak of the COVID variants. I mean, right now we're on Delta, but if it keeps cycling around the world, let it go for another year. Who knows how bad this could get?
So Johnson & Johnson is not an mRNA vaccine. So there's an alternative to mRNA if you're concerned about it.
And there was some guidance with the nerve disease with that. Sorry to interrupt.
I do think we kind of overlooked something really interesting, is that when did we mandate vaccinations in public schools?
Well, I know the Supreme Court case concerning this was in 1904,
Yeah.
so I would know it would have to have been earlier than that. I know that Washington even had his troops vaccinated, though I
For
forget.
smallpox.
Yeah.
Smallpox, was it?
Yeah.
Which is pretty crazy to think
Inoculated, not Yeah, you're right.
about. Well, I don't know what they did, hit people with a rock and then
It was
pour
like
liquid
a
in.
needle, I think.
It was-
and they would
yeah.
they would prick you with the needle that had like a weakened sample or something.
And they would have had to forge that needle, like with a blacksmith. Isn't that crazy to think about? Like Washington's
I know, like someone pouring it, and then
Yeah.
today it's just a machine that makes it.
it's just wild to think about.
Well, so, man, I think the real issue for the most part is just mandatory.
Well, I just also have another question. Do you think that there might be any...
Okay, so mutualism has come to mean non-communist anarchism or non-communist socialism, which, no. You can't
bad
be an
motives
anarchist without
behind
being
these
a
four
socialist.
companies,
That's-
AstraZeneca, Moderna, Pfizer, and Johnson & Johnson, considering they are big pharma and they pursue profits, which generally, as a libertarian socialist, you're skeptical of. Do you think maybe they might have nefarious motives?
Oh, their intentions are reprehensible. They have for many years made money off the backs of American deaths. The opioid crisis is almost entirely attributable to the
And the
malfeasance.
Sackler family.
Yeah, I mean, no moral love for these companies. If this could be, and by the way, the mRNA process was developed through public funding. It was, an effort invested in by the collective good, something I'm generally supportive of. When it comes to these companies themselves, and when I say, go get your Pfizer vaccine, whatever, please do not mistake this or anything else that I say for an endorsement of the practices of these companies. It is only through cruel twist of fate and the economic system we live in that they are the ones put in a position to handle this. But it was the workers at those companies, not the CEOs, who did the work.
I'm just curious, does that ever make you stop short and say, maybe they're trying to massively inoculate us on a vaccine that might not be as effective to try to pursue profit, not well-being? Does that ever enter into your calculation?
It's a consideration you should take about anything produced by any company that's run for profit, which is everything. Basically every need in American society is tempered by the knowledge that there are people out there who are paid very large salaries to sell it to you. This is the case for everything we do, everything we eat. Every time you run down Main Street, or in my case, I guess, the boulevards in Los Angeles, you're seeing the protracted efforts of a billion-dollar industry to make sure you want things they're selling. Could that be the case for COVID? Undeniably, there was a profit incentive involved. Oh my goodness, I'm sorry. And there was probably a protracted effort on the part of these companies to make sure they were the first, and they probably took every dirty advantage they could get. With the data available, I have to still, much as I would say, hey, I would prefer eating McDonald's food to starvation, I have to say this is probably still something we should be doing.
Do you want to do? I don't want to stand. It's been 20 minutes.
No,
so
for sure.
Do you want to make a final point?
Maybe you would starve instead.
I actually think this has been really constructive and not like that, inflammatory. I think that deep down you have this kind of, urge that I'm already there, where maybe they want this thing to go on for another decade to go make another $100 billion, and maybe the cheap drug of hydroxychloroquine or ivermectin might work better than they might think.
I don't have that urge.
Other studies would disagree with you earlier. We could change the topic. I just think it's
so.
That was a healthy discourse.
Can I meet in the middle on that one, on that very last one?
Yeah.
I do not trust the pharmaceutical industries, though the available evidence does seem to point to the effectiveness of the vaccines. I say this, nationalize the pharma industry. Seriously. It could be used for the collective good, and I would unironically actually trust it more in the hands of our ineffective, bloated government than I would the sociopaths who run it currently. And
So
I mean that.
I'll wrap this up by saying, always talk to your doctor. This is one of the biggest things. Like, YouTube is very strict on this, especially. But I genuinely think this is the right answer. If you're watching this, don't assume anyone here is right or wrong. I mean, I'm sure there are people who think Charlie's made a bunch of good points, and you have. Ultimately, it's down between you and your doctor. And I'll stress, for whatever your opinion, Charlie, I understand. Hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin haven't been approved by the FDA, and so that's just another.
We're just asking questions whether it works or not.
So that's why I think it's really important, because I think there are. I got to be honest. In regards to ivermectin, people have been eating horse paste that they sell. I looked up what the FDA says about it. They say do not do this, and they actually give a very good reason. They say, although people are claiming that if an animal can take it, someone else can. That's not true. There's some things that dogs can't have that humans can. Right. So please talk to your doctor, and I definitely hope we can continue having debates about this stuff, because that was vastly important. I'm really glad you guys were able to have that conversation.
I hadn't even heard of the horse paste thing. That's
yes.
horrifying.
Ivermectin is technically a drug for horses. It's off-label use.
Oh.
Yeah, it's a dewormer. And so you can go to Tractor Supply, and they have a sign that says do not eat this, and please.
Any drug for horses will burn a human out from the inside. Those things are.
Yeah.
You've been near they're titans. They're like.
So let's talk about the other big topic, critical race theory. That's the one that I had a terrible answer, absolutely, when you asked me about it. And it was because I think my approach to it was too surface level cultural. So the last time we had Vaush on, when you asked me about it, I couldn't give you a good answer. And I think we can talk about what's happening in schools, the things they're teaching children. And I don't know if either of you has an opinion and wants to start off with.
The floor is yours.
Yeah, so there are two CRTs. There's the critical race theory that I know of, which is a highly esoteric, essentially elective class that you can take in some law schools that teaches you a variety of incredibly eclectic legal theories some of which I like and some of which I think I disagree with. And then there's the critical race theory that people like Christopher Rufo have been trying to push, a sort of catch-all term to describe all anti-racism. We see these anti-CRT bills being put through straight legislators, and a lot of them don't even mention critical race theory. They mention stuff that's been boilerplate anti-racist theory for 2 centuries. That stuff really concerns me. I think that academia is to an extent sacred. Of course, all the good things in our society now were born in the halls of academia. The Enlightenment, our democracy, the fair trial that we enjoy if we're arrested.
Using
These were
the term
things that were
sacred is a
originally
good
considered
move
to
on
be the
Charlie
crackpot
Kirk.
initiatives of academics, and only through the respect of those ideas have we arrived at, well, what we have today. So
Yeah, using the term, it could be it could backfire because Charlie could turn around and be like, "Well, but you're an atheist, and I don't think you hold anything sacred." Or holding something sacred means it can't be questioned. I think we should question everything. But Vaush will clarify if he needs to, so it's fine.
if there are problems within academia, I would have them solved in academia, not through the big hand of government reaching in and censoring everyone who says something that disagrees with some political party.
So a point of clarification: you don't believe that critical race theory is in schools?
I think that maybe there are ideas which overlap with critical race theory, but there's always going to be overlap between academic ideas. I mean, I drank water, so did Hitler. One of those type situations.
I think you're coming at it from in good faith, where you're technically correct here that the super academic way of defining critical race theory is not being taught to fourth graders, right? With that
I'd
being
hope so. It'd be pretty.
With
tough
that
for
being
them.
said, there are. It's almost like saying, we're not teaching advanced geometry to fourth graders, but we are teaching them, very basic math, right? We'll get them the Euclidean geometry. So the very basics of this are definitely in schools. And there's many examples of this, right? The National Education Association literally came out in their press release and said that they are going to push for, and their word was critical race theory, just so we're clear. They use that term, right? That's not Christopher Rufo, that's not James Lindsay, who are good friends of mine. That's the National Education Association, right? And I think they might even be talking about something different than the Delgado theory of critical race theory, right? And so what I want to try to do here, Tim, is we can talk about critical race theory as an academic theory, or we could use a filler term like wokeism, which is more like racial justice, which I actually think would probably be, we can call it racial justice and meet in the middle, right?
I really feel like there are probably 4-digit number of people in America who are studied on actual critical race theory, not including myself.
And
by the way.
I'm not even prepared to do that. But I'm happy to talk about racial justice education and wokeism, which I think
is what the discourse is centered on.
Well, I think you guys actually agree in essence that the academic critical race theory there's overlap with a component in schools, but what we often hear is someone will say critical race theory is being taught to my kids, and then someone will say cite one author of critical race theory that we've brought up in school. And the issue is we refer to it as I believe it's called critical race praxis. Mm-hmm. So this is something different than critical race theory. It's being implemented in education, but that's why you said wokeism. And
I just think that discussion is so unhelpful when Joy Reid and Christopher Rufo are screaming at each other, and Joy Reid is saying like it's not being taught anywhere. Christopher Rufo, so yes, it is. When in reality they're both right. They're just talking about two completely different things.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
No, I do. And Christopher Rufo has admitted this is like a kind of tactic. Critical race theory does sound spooky. I get a little shiver when I say it. Whereas stuff like anti-racist theory or structural racism maybe compel a little bit more thought when discussed on. It's kind of a moral panic that, in principle, I really disagree with. But if you want to talk, we can call it wokeism if you want. That's probably a more accurate term.
Yeah. I will just say, to the point about Christopher Rufo, white supremacist is also used as a catch-all term in the other direction.
If we're talking,
dormitories.
Generally not a fan. I think that I don't think they're like explicitly harmful in the same way that traditional segregation is, but I also think that it incentivizes bad types of socialization, where the way that you get a reprieve from the faults of society is to find comfort in people of your own race. Maybe that incentivizes some bad stuff. In my university, we had safe spaces, but you know what they were? They were like chilled, like coffee break rooms behind like.
Where'd you go?
Latin. I went to Humboldt State.
Okay.
And right behind there, and like anyone could go in there, whatever. Just the only thing that they asked was that you not be like a dick, but as long as you met that qualification, that was fine. That to me, that's a good safe space. Maybe that works.
So just happy to go through more.
Go for it, please. No, hit me.
I think this is actually really helpful. So how about reparations for slavery?
I think I'm pretty in favor of that, yeah.
Okay. Make the argument.
It's just an owed debt. We said 40 acres and a mule. We never paid it. And unfortunately, the material reality for a lot of people who were slaves didn't change that much after they were emancipated. If you were a slave and you're made free, that's a big step up, don't get me wrong, but you have nothing. Nothing. And because of the way generational wealth transfers from father to son or mother to anyone, to their children. Caught me there. Unfortunately, we still see the consequences of that borne out. You can actually look county by county. Where were slaves kept? Which were the plantation counties? And you see, this group of black like neighborhoods, that's where they settled after slavery ended. It's like really immediate stuff, and it's a debt owed that this nation never paid.
I don't necessarily agree on reparations, but I think we need to clarify what that ultimately means. But I will say I've long held the same position. I actually worked on a documentary. There's an issue of people who were enslaved, then they were released, and they were not given any means to actually develop and grow. And so there's a generational wealth gap between people based on race for
Okay, so mutualism is mildly incoherent. I got it.
these historical reasons. The challenge I see, I suppose, is, we've done a lot to amend the laws and change them. For instance, redlining and blockbusting have become illegal. And now we're dealing with an ultimately, I believe, is a class issue. Of course, racism still exists. But anyway, I digress on that point. What I wanted to get to is specifically on reparations. What do you view reparations as, more importantly?
So this is a big divide. Some people think like cash payments. I'm not a big fan of that. It doesn't fix the problem, for one. It's if you can put money into that community, but there's been research done on how long a dollar stays in a black neighborhood as opposed to a white neighborhood. And if a black neighborhood, all of the businesses are owned by corporate boards that are all majority white, eventually the money filters out and you get a very temporary boost in living situation, not much long-term structural change. I'm a big fan of structural reparations, not based on race, but rather based on targeting neighborhoods that need it the most. Some of these neighborhoods are like white. I passed through some of them on my way out from Ronald Reagan Airport. I can tell which parts of this country, you can see it in the bones of the neighborhood. And I think that a new proper reparations project, a new deal even, would go a long way. Get some
so
work
you're
crews
saying
out
not
there.
even based on race?
I think that we should recognize that this is largely a racial project because, unfortunately, poverty and race are really intertwined in this country. But in terms of applying it, I think that it would be much more healthy if we treated it like a collective effort to bring up the lowest sort of echelon of our economic.
So I want to ask you,
Yes.
Charlie, would you agree with a program that was in how do I describe this? Explained as reparations, but was not based on race, went to people based on class and neighborhood, so that it could help Latinos and white people and Asians and everybody?
First of all, I'm against reparations. I just don't like the word because it kind of implies this intergenerational type guilt or allowance that I kind of reject, and I'm happy to build that out further. Do I agree that the question is mostly class? Oh, absolutely. And I think that Vaush is hitting on something, and I think that you're saying that it's inherently racial. I really want to explore that with you because I think that's interesting. I think you're wrong, but I think that's interesting, where I think the racial thing is actually being used to distract people like you and I from actually talking about what's really happening here, which is a small group of people getting a lot richer while normal people get poor. And I think the racial thing is being used as this distraction tool
Vaush is
to throw
making
smoke screen in
Charlie
the middle,
turn.
while we're talking about something that we're never really going to have consensus on, when the true struggle right now is mainly economic.
Yeah, well, I think that applying reparations along racial lines runs into a bunch of really tough issues. Which neighborhoods? Do you go by like blood? Like, can you prove your great-great-grandfather was a slave? It gets very difficult very quickly. Maybe that would be the most direct interpretation of generational reparations. But in my mind, the reason why it's important to recognize the racial issue here is that the nature of class divides in this country is cut into racial policy prior to the Civil Rights Act. The redlining that took place, lines which still remain not in law but in practice, led to very distinct, sometimes, one side of the highway is nice and the other side of the highway, it legitimately
Can I
looks
just
like
jump in real quick?
Uh-huh.
I'm from Chicago. 47th Street was split by race. No joke. This is long-standing effects on the city. Just to point out.
No, and I grew up in LA, and on either side of the 5, which cut through the city, or the 405, sorry.
Let me
right
just
there.
interject something too, and I don't know if you're familiar. We were actually told that we would be arrested from the south side of 47th. If we crossed 47th, we would get arrested because the cops would pull up and say, "You don't live in this neighborhood. What are you doing here?"
I'm from the suburbs of Chicago, so I've heard stories like that. It's very very clear to say I'm not from Chicago.
I grew up in Beverly Hills, which is close though to West Hollywood and Koreatown, and the lines are clear as day. The reason I say that though about like the racial project is that because explicit discrimination is no longer in the law, we've pretty much wiped that out, with the exception of some, I guess, edge cases. The project of systemic racism, or the existence of systemic racism, is something which is carried through class by inertia. isn't something you can explicitly legislate along anymore. I mean, obviously, nobody's out there passing laws like black people can't do this. That'd be silly. But instead, the consequences of slavery and of second-class citizenship for black people left unaddressed, a wound left to fester that unfortunately can't really heal itself inertially unless we do something specific.
So the issue with that argument is that the more that we intervened in the black community, it actually had the opposite effect. And Thomas Sowell probably has done the best research and literature on this. You can laugh all you want. He's got a lot of credentials.
I wasn't trying to besmirch.
He's a very thoughtful thinker, and he actually lived through this, right? He lived through the black Renaissance in the 40s and the 50s, where redlining was a legitimate problem.
Totally was.
So was yellow
Don't
lining,
let
by
him
the
lie
way,
to you.
against Italians and against Jews. Nowhere nearly as bad, but there were other degrees of discrimination based on ethnicity and cultural background. And the black community, especially, you know, the area really well in the south of Chicago, right near the Chicago stockyards, the black community almost had this rallying cry where they were being discriminated against everywhere, and they kind of collectivized their purchasing power, and they saw their incomes increase actually at a higher rate than white Americans in the 40s and 50s and early 60s. You've heard this argument many times, and you probably, disagree with it, but it's just true, is that the moment that we all of a sudden de-emphasized fathers being in the home and subsidized fatherlessness, we saw all these other trends increase. So in right before the Civil Rights Act passed, about 24% of black children were born without a father. Now it's upwards of 70%. You guys can look at the Washington Examiner. It's 77%. Let's say it's 65%. So something has to explain that 40-point increase.
May I?
Yeah, just let me finish.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily that America got more racist. It could be the cocaine thing, which, is a common issue. It could be, operations of all these things. But a 40-point increase, I would point to a culture of fatherlessness, really bad government-run public schools, and then subsidizing behavior that isn't good.
So there are a few things that I can agree with you on. First of all, having two people in your house to raise you is pretty much essential. You absolutely
Glad
need
we
to.
agree.
This is undeniable. While I don't believe in shaming single parents, even if their single-parentedness is a product of bad decision-making, it's still good. It's in this economy, one parent, honestly.
Yeah.
But with that being said, there has been research shown that the rate of black fatherlessness is somewhat over-exaggerated, in large part because that number only applies to married fathers, so husbands raising their children. It turns out when you account for unmarried black couples taking care of their kids, the numbers actually rise to those just below white couples. I think there was an article on that. I don't know if I saw it in Vice, but it tracks back to some really big study that was done back in 2016. So that's one point. But you are right. There are perverse incentives. For example, many welfare stipulations cut off with a shared income, which is only a few $1,000s per year higher than the necessary cutoff for the single income. Meaning that if you're a single mom, you can apply for the welfare just fine. But then if you get married or otherwise file jointly, you go above the cap for welfare. This is a horribly designed program, undeniably, and it incentivizes bad, destructive behavior. The best thing that we can do, we restructure the welfare system in this country. Welfare is good for us. It is. I don't benefit from it. No, I don't think either of you benefit from it, I'm guessing. But we do collectively downstream from the increased economic potential of people who now have the money to afford daycare, proper childcare, get an education. In the long run, people in this country being richer enriches all of us. It's a mutual project. So we work on that. We find out what works and what doesn't, which welfare programs function, which don't, which types of economic revitalization function and which don't. And I legitimately believe that if we applied this country has the bones to be just a permanent economic beacon on the hill, just like a shining example to the rest of the world.
I agree with a lot of that. The bigger issue with the racial thing is that when you put some of these factors in even to present data, it doesn't pan out on racial lines. Right?
Yeah, it does.
And this is where I think you'll agree, because you just said two parents in the home is a good thing, which we totally agree on. I think that's the ideal.
I hope Vaush brings up the thing that's found out where both parents are in the home. It's just marriage is a disparity, because marriage is fucking expensive.
Everything shows that is something that we should push for.
Three parents maybe getting even better.
Oh yeah,
50%.
Yeah, polyamorous relationships.
Yeah,
not a fan.
Based.
But I will say that if you look at the data from the government, that a white child being raised by a single mother is less likely to succeed by 10 independently picked metrics than a black child being raised by a mother and a father. And so maybe it's less about the skin color and more about the removal of parents and specifically fathers in the homes. Now, if you want to talk about a domestic Marshall Plan to go put fathers back in the home regardless of skin color, I will sign up for that in a second.
With the right welfare, the right systems, I think people will tend to their own families.
But that would then all of a sudden de-emphasize what you said earlier, where it says it needs to be on racial lines, where I say, no, it needs to be on nuclear family lines.
Well, no, I think that the neighborhood revitalization should just be on like a sort of class assessment. I think that when we recognize this problem, though, there are so many trends when it comes to poverty that involve the discussion of race, you know? And there are some which do not. There are some types of poverty, some effects that are just ubiquitous and equally felt. But with regards to, say, black people, the fact that they couldn't get loans to purchase homes for a very long time. I mean, there were people living who couldn't do this. The fact that they didn't benefit from the Marshall Plan, if I remember correctly, after World War II.
Well, Marshall Plan was Europe. You're talking about the GI Bill.
Oh, sorry, the GI Bill. My apologies.
Let me just point out all these white guys sitting having a debate over the black community. Huh?
I just think that there is a lot of economic inequality. A lot of it's tied to race, but we don't need to turn this into some weird blood quantum issue where we go tracking down every black American and holding them under a microscope to see whether they get benefits. Now, we just need to tend to our own.
This is where I want to. We kind of got off critical race theory very quickly.
I forgot about that.
I want to bring it back.
We're agreeing way too much, Tim.
All right.
No, because this is one of the issues I see. Right, you see these conversations around. I don't know how you describe it because it's a variety of things. Wokeism is typically a catch-all term for some kind of ideology that involves anti-racism, which involves critical race theory, critical race praxis. And you're seeing in schools specific curriculums where they say to kids like, we had a book here. Mm-hmm. We had a book brought to us by one of these parents who's been going to these schools. And it was an anti-racist curriculum workbook where it asked children why they thought that black children felt bad about their skin color. Now, I take issue with those things. They had another book where it was a little girl yelling at her mother saying, "You're lying to me about race." And then there was a whiteness contract with a devil tail coming out of it.
Okay, I saw that one.
Yeah, these are in schools.
Yeah, okay. So the whiteness devil tail thing, I saw that. That's indefensible. Yeah. I'm not going to stand at that. With regards to that, what was it? Why do you think black folk feel bad about their skin?
And I'll be careful because I don't have the book in front of me. Mm-hmm. It was something to this effect. It was a bunch of questions where it would ask you things like that and then ask you to answer. What have you done to make someone based on their skin color behave or whatever and things of that nature?
I think these are conversations that are worth having. I wonder, with regards to what you're saying, do you know what grade level these were at?
I think she mentioned the woman. It was Asra.
Yeah, Asra.
I think 4th grade.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
But I got to be honest, the anti-racist one didn't have any pictures or anything. It was just questions. And I think she mentioned it was in a 3rd grade. What was it called? What was the book called about the whiteness contract? The one you said was indefensible. That one was like a little girl who looked to be about 8 years old. So
yeah, I saw that online.
Can I ask a question?
So
let's go to just piece.
Yeah, sure.
Issue by issue. Ibram X. Kendi, who's kind of one of the archangels of the wokeism movement,
beloved figure in the minds of conservatives and liberals alike.
So Ibram X. Kendi, and I'm paraphrasing, and you guys could pick up the quote, is that we need discrimination today because there was discrimination yesterday. That's the essence of the quote, right, Tim?
Yeah, he said the only solution for past discrimination is present discrimination, and the only solution for present discrimination is future discrimination.
So I find that to be reprehensible. What say you?
I think it's misguided in large part because I don't believe if there was some God who could just distribute all resources in a perfectly ordained way and did so at the snap of a finger, then maybe that would be a decent argument. In the real world, we have to go through politics, and any kind of discriminatory treatment under any circumstances, no matter how well intentioned, is going to have adverse effects. So with regard to what he said, there is a very charitable interpretation, and that charitable interpretation is discriminatory practices in the past necessitate favorable practices today, a way of bringing people up. My reparations argument, I mean, the poor in this country have always had it bad.
Okay, so he's definitely a fascist if you pay enough attention to his content.
Preferable treatment towards the poor. We do this with welfare because there are systemic barriers keeping them from full participation. Along racial lines, I don't even know what that would look like. I don't even know how that could look good. I'm not a big fan of affirmative
action. He wrote an
action.
Amendment, right, called the Anti-Racist Amendment to the Constitution. It's not being considered anytime soon, where it would be preference.
So you'll see Biden will get it.
Yeah, based on skin color, that there would be some sort of accommodation based just by the melanin content in your skin.
There is one thing I want to say, though, and this is common in upper academia, and I know IBRIM sometimes gets brought into non-academic discussions, which I don't consider myself an academic, so I'm including myself in that. But sometimes I think these are fun to discuss, these ideas. What I noticed, at least in some of the classes that I took, the higher-end classes, was that sometimes when you were presented ideas, they were presented not to have you agree with them, but rather to incentivize the greatest discussion. For example, I wasn't an economist, but I did learn about Karl Marx. Now, not many professors are actual Marxists, unfortunately. So when Marx was brought up in that context, it wasn't like, here's what you need to know, here's what you should believe. It was more, here are some ideas, radical and agreeable. What do you think about them? And when I look at what Kendi has written, I don't often agree with some of the more radical propositions, but I do enjoy the process. And I don't think that's something which should warrant the state intervening to cut out those discussions. I think that's a
great
brutish response.
That's a great segue, if I could go. So the next question then is, should we be teaching first and second and third graders to be hyper conscious aware of race all the time? I think that's destructive. I think it goes against the American promise of e pluribus unum, of caring more about character than skin color. And yes, Martin Luther King Jr. was a mixed bag when it came to this stuff.
He's a cool guy.
But he was a very radical socialist in some regard, but he really hit it perfectly when he said that this was the ideal of the American system. Do you see any downsides to getting 3-year-olds just caring, not 3-year-olds, third graders caring about the color of people's skin all the time?
Well, I think depending on their environment, they might already, whether they know it or not, in very implicit and subtle ways. We know from tests done, for example, on like little kids, like 4-year-olds or whatever, that some elements of implicit racial bias already infect their thinking. Now, that isn't a moral judgment. We're all flawed beings. We live and we die. We all have biases. That is just a part of life. But I think conversations about those things can be valuable. I don't believe we live in a colorblind world, so teaching people that we do can often lead them to remain ignorant to evident problems. Now, to what extent would you be comfortable, what would you say, like bringing a racial consciousness to third graders?
For me, very little to none. As don't care about it, de-emphasize it, look at the spirit, the soul, the conduct, and the character of the human being. Their skin color means nothing. Not saying that you should start to emphasize, organize what people look like, because therefore it means something that we're going to tell you. A great example is that this is the textbook definition of stereotyping, right? Is that if you see a black person, you don't know their history. You don't know if they're the son of a Nigerian billionaire. You don't know if they're an immigrant from Turks and Caicos. And you don't know if they're the 9th generation descendant of slaves, right? There's been 2 million blacks that have come to America legally through the immigration process since 1980. So this sort of hyper fixation on race, and I want to keep on getting back to this because I'm just curious, is do you think this is actually helpful when there actually might be stuff that 90% of the country agrees on? Do you think this actually might be a smokescreen tactic?
Well, it really depends on what's being taught. So here are some things I obviously don't want taught. One group is better than another, of course, black people are like this, white people are like this.
That is being taught in some schools.
There are some schools that do that, and while I would look to see their curriculum mended, I just don't want to implicitly agree with like a state ban. I would see adjustments done. But there are some things that I think could be done well. For example, say you're teaching about very basic early history,
This is where I wanted to get to.
Yeah, okay.
This is important.
So here are some things about America's founding that I like. One of the first practical liberal democracies, glory of the republic. Folks had nice hair back then.
Not a democracy, but a republic.
Right.
That's
well,
okay.
I mean, they're not mutually exclusive. And we, of course, did more to fulfill the promise of a democracy with time. But obviously, when America was founded, it was a slave state. 1 in every 6 people in America at that time was human property.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
How many states had abolished slavery by the time the Constitution was ratified?
Well, I don't know the exact number.
9 out of 13. That's not a slave country.
Well, then you could say it was a confederacy with portions that were slave
I think
states.
that's better said. 9 out of 13 had already abolished. There was a sunset moratorium for slavery in the Constitution.
So this could...
Vermont abolished slavery in 1777. We were on the way to eradication. We were not a slave country.
Well, hold on. I mean,
and I'll add one thing.
We were on the way, but then like 80 years later, it was still happening.
So the question is why, right? That's a really important question. And
economics, I
imagine. Yeah, so cotton gin and John C. Calhoun. Happy to go through that. But yeah.
There was actually a grievance in the Declaration of Independence, specifically that the Crown had enslaved people.
The first draft.
in the first draft from Thomas Jefferson, the crown had enslaved people who had done nothing to offend the crown, brought them to the states, and then were then offering them the freedom that was stolen from them to wage war against the colonists who had grievances.
It's an effective strategy. The
It
Union
is,
did it
but
too.
he-
They promised the slaves
Right.
when they moved southward. Yeah.
Jefferson took that out, and he did it because they felt, and this is according to historians,
Oh my
that
God,
without,
Tim
I
Pool was
think it was
such a
South Carolina and
fucking
Georgia,
grifter.
they would not have been able to win the Revolutionary War, and so they had to remove that,
That's exactly
hoping
right.
they would stay in. Now, the reality is, I'll just say one more point. They thought they were going to lose anyway. They really did. They didn't think they could go up against the greatest empire in the world at the time. So it's kind of unfortunate, I think. An important factor here is that I believe it was the British Empire, actually 1833 had abolished slavery in all of its territories, and it took the U.S. a little bit longer to do so. But I want to make sure I stress this issue for the start of the country was contentious and ultimately led to violence because from the beginning, as Charlie pointed out, most of the states had already abolished this, so it was like people were ready to fight from the beginning.
Oh,
Wow.
I just want to say to that, my understanding of the founding of America isn't as simplistic as the founding fathers were evil because X or Y. I recognize, of course, that
And I appreciate that.
there are incredible complexities to those issues. And also, I'm not a historian. There are probably tons of things out there I don't even know that might change my opinion in the future. But with that being said, while I recognize there were fine-bodied, hearted, and souled Americans who recognized slavery was a moral aberration from the get-go, 1 in every 6 Americans was owned. And while that may have been constrained to some of the states, it was still ultimately under the purview of the federal government to make decisions with regards to the legality and constitutionality of that. Now, some people, they get really defensive when this conversation comes. I'm not saying you guys, but some people, they do. And I think it's because they think I'm assigning some kind of moral worth to them now or to the country now or making some kind of broad prescriptive statement. I'm not. The only thing I'm saying is when you're teaching history to a bunch of kids, you have to teach it all. At least you have to teach the basic pointers. And for Black Americans, the history of this country has been less than favorable. So I think that in the context of that discussion, saying, and to this day, we still have some problems with race. There are some legacies of slavery that still affect Black people, and we're working on it today. Something like that. That's a kind of racialization that I'm in favor of because it doesn't encourage stereotyping. It doesn't encourage discrimination. It just encourages a base awareness of some serious problems.
So
Okay. This here. Poole complained last year that feminism had negatively impacted his ability to find a romantic partner and start a family. You know what the problem is, though? It's definitely not me, he said. I think it's everybody else. Dude, take off your fucking beanie, wash that shit, shower up, fucking present yourself in a respectable manner and
that's not
respect
happening,
women, you
right?
piece of
Is
shit.
that largely what we're seeing through school districts like Chicago and in Washington, D.C., and the entire California school system, representing 10,000 schools and 6 million students.
I've seen the documents on those.
Yeah, is that it doesn't have that kind of nuance and complexity that you just presented, right? Where let me just say this,
Yeah,
is that part of the kind of archangel triumphant of the wokeism coalition is Nicole Hannah-Jones, Robin DiAngelo, and Ibram X. Kendi. And Nicole Hannah-Jones in particular, right, the author of the 1619 Project, she heretically says that America was founded on slavery, right? And so
I'd
part
be
of,
okay with that.
but it's just not true.
It depends on what you mean by founded
So
on.
she defines this. She says the founding fathers were in favor of it. Not true. George Washington wasn't. John Adams wasn't. John Quincy Adams wasn't. Thomas Jefferson even signed a moratorium of new slaves coming into the United States. Ben Franklin chaired an anti-slavery convention in 1775. None of these guys were writing expositionally how wonderful slavery
Well, this isn't being taught to third graders, right? The 1619 Project's a little New York op-ed.
No, it's
part of
not.
the-
See, that's where you're wrong. The 1619 Project's being implemented as school district curriculum in thousands of school districts across the country.
I've
That's
seen-
true.
well,
Across the country.
It's not just like a podcast. This is curriculum.
Right, there are principles of the 1619 Project that I think are defensible. First of all, we as Americans tend to think of the founding of our country as its legal founding, But the legal founding of the United States didn't really mean much for a slave. I mean, it really didn't matter that much for the peasantry of the time, no matter what.
See, that's where I disagree. So when was the first state to abolish slavery? Vermont in 1777. Why?
Well, I mean, for the
Because they were
slaves who lived
inspired by the Declaration of Independence. Things started to change in that year,
Right, but the slaves that then continued to be slaves would have been in the states that didn't make that choice, right?
which
I mean,
were
they would have been
largely
in
in southern states.
So
And
Well, that's what I mean. I didn't mean to miss out on the particulars there. The only point that I'm making is that depending on whose lineage you follow, depending on the narrative that you tell, this is a very postmodern idea.
Charlie
and
Kirk,
I would
get
like to
mad.
consider myself charitable to postmodernism, the idea that there are many ways you can describe the human experience, which I think we all believe to some extent. Depending on who you follow, you get very different ideas on what America is, when America was founded, not in a legal sense, but in a conceptual sense, and who today holds the birthrights to which they were entitled. And these conversations should be had. They're worthwhile conversations to have. I've seen some of the curriculums in these schools. I find some of them a little bit objectionable. But to be perfectly clear, I've found school curriculums objectionable for ages. About half of Americans believe in the lost cause myth, the idea that the North started the a civil war and it was over like states' rights or whatever. That's believed by a large number of Americans. There are textbooks put out by Pearson in Texas that have
There is
narratives
some
in them
truth
that
to
are-
that, by the way,
There's,
just so we're clear.
I'm
Happy to go through Civil War history.
Well, let me-
on
let me-
that, but
I just want to say I have long had problems with many of the ways children are taught concepts in this country.
That's fair.
None of them have made me want to get my state legislators to just outright ban all of these ideas.
Well, so let me. I'll make 2 points. First, the 1619 Project is in schools. Newsweek reports U.S. schools have openly taught the 1619 Project for months. This is back in September. We've got Education Next. The 1619 Project enters classrooms. We have the Pulitzer Center, the 1619 Project curriculum. Here you will find resources for teaching 1619 in your schools. And I don't know if I have one more source. Right. Then we move to the.
Do they read the full thing in class? That's crazy. It's pretty dense reading, you know.
It is. They do it. And then lawmakers push to ban 1619 from schools. So it's there. It is.
And so let me tell you why people like myself are pushing for the bans of the 1619 Project. Is that first of all, it's just not true. It is not even charitably, in the most charitable reading, to use a word that you used, even remotely fair to the ethos or the founding of the country. It doesn't go to original source documents. It doesn't go to quotations, and it meanders through generalizations and very heavy emphasis on emotion.
Can I ask something though, really
Sure,
quick?
go ahead.
Is this not being presented as an alternate perspective, as opposed to replacing the entirety of our curriculum?
No, it is. And this is an important thing, which is what is education, right? So is education where we're supposed to, for 3rd, 4th, and 5th, and 6th graders, open up every single bad idea that's ever been discovered and have kids choose? Or are we trying to lead them towards something? Lead them towards having better developed character? Lead them towards trying to find objective truth?
Moral. We want to make them moral.
I agree. And so the question is, what is good? What is evil? Well, we don't know a line is crooked unless we have a straight line to compare it to.
Well, you know what I think on this, don't you?
I actually don't.
The narrative we've told about the founding of this country has for a long time been deeply whitewashed. We talk about the founding fathers like they're heroes, and there is heroism in their lives, no denying that. And we often gloss over many of the horrors
Jesus
of this country.
Christ, y'all.
There are things that we've done, for example, that we would use as an incentive to forever despise other countries that nobody's even taught about. Like one I read recently, for example, was that we did mass chemical bathings, and I believe it was sterilizations of Hispanic people at the beginning of the 20th century, moving up past the southern border, because there were like these militias forming in towns near the border. And they just did it because they had the de facto support of the local government as a way of discouraging their movement up. Now, the numbers involved in that are significant. And I feel like, well, that's maybe not great for 4th graders, there could be more work done to talk about the faults with this country in addition to eulogizing its
The question is,
largely
what's
white
the
leaders.
goal, though, right? Is the goal to try to have young people graduate by the time of high school to be skeptical, apprehensive, and not very proud of the country, or eventually tell a true and patriotic story where you have people graduating that are thankful and have gratitude?
Oh,
That's the purpose of education when it comes through.
Gratitude is not the purpose of education.
Well, I think
No.
gratitude's a moral necessity.
No,
No.
you should be grateful for the people in your life, but I will never be grateful to the state. I'm not that much of a
Well,
collectivist.
not a state. Are you not thankful that you live in America?
I'm thankful of the things that make my life easier. I was born white to well-off parents, and today I enjoy many of the benefits of having really responsible and
Are
attentive
you
parents.
thankful you
No.
have constitutional rights that
my
are protected
God.
by government, given
True.
to you by God?
But do you know how those constitutional rights came about? They were fought
They
for by
were-
whiny bitches like me who were never satisfied with what they were already
They
given.
were granted by God, protected in the
They
Constitution
were
in
fought for
1787.
by whiny, same as the 14th and 15th Amendments, everything that's come since. We fought for them, and it is discontentedness
Are you
that
thankful
leads
for
us
those
to fight.
people then?
I'm thankful for their efforts, as am I for
there's some gratitude.
Sure, I'm grateful to them. But patriotism, I'm grateful to what people in America do. But America's a concept. It's been used to do a lot of good and a lot of harm.
It's a home.
Well, a home can be I mean, in the broadest sense, but I know what my home is. I know where my family lives, and I'm loyal to them. When it comes to this country, though, this is a political and economic bloc, and I have only one concern, and it's that the people in this country live the best lives possible. Also outside the country, but I live here. This is my backyard. And when I want people graduating, from high school, I don't want them to feel this sense of contentedness. Contentedness is the death of activism for all that's good. And activists have always been, you're an activist in your own way, as am I, have always been the forerunners for good.
They've done a lot of damage too.
Sure, they have, but we make the world move. And I want to get kids interested in the flaws in this country, because that teaches them to grow up and care about them so hard they fix them.
This is a great piece of disagreement. We have clarity, not agreement, which is obviously what we want, where I think that we should try to be developing and graduating kids with strong character that want to appreciate and protect a country, and to try to be active against forces that wish to deconstruct it. Your goal, and we're just not going to persuade each other, is that you want to try to graduate activists that know the flaws and are willing to mobilize to try to fix them or to undo whatever system might be effectuating. Is that fair?
As long as it's responsible and effective, yeah. There are ways to do progressive. Of course, I'm a progressive, so I'll say it's good by default, but there are ways to do it poorly. I disagree with people on the left constantly, either over issues of actual concept or issues of optics or issues of engagement. I always find something to disagree with people on. It's very fun living. But with all that being said, I have to wonder, is it not the prerogative, and I'm not assigning this to you, of tyrants to make sure that
Just so it's known, I'm in favor of gift economies over mutualism. Just so you know.
Children who graduate from their schools find no fault in the nations they're taught to love?
See, I never said no fault, but you could be thankful for something, and you can have a holistic view of something, understand that there were stumbles and there were missteps, while also being pretty freaking proud of that something. How exceptional this project is.
What if there are current problems, like today,
We should talk about those. Like we already talked about fatherlessness, government overreach. Tim, you want to interject?
Oh no, I think it's interesting to me. You're from the suburbs of Chicago. You grew up in Beverly Hills. Somebody commented, I think it was on Twitter, they said that when they went to school, they weren't taught about Black Wall Street or the Tulsa bombings and things like that. And that's proof, or that shows that our schools are not teaching. And I was like, I was taught all those things,
So
in
was
Chicago. We were taught about the Trail of Tears. We were taught about westward expansion. We were taught about the violation of treaties.
I was taught a lot as well.
Yeah, we were taught a lot about that.
When we learn history, what we're really learning is a story. I think it's called historiography. Obviously, when we're just looking at the facts of history, I mean, what is it, data and sheets, wrote transcriptions of things people have said. Nobody teaches that. You teach the story. And the story we've told for a long time has bowled over a lot of problems I think we should work to fix. Do we want people to be thankful? Sure. I don't want to...
So we agree on that. Good.
I don't want to stop teaching kids that there are undeniable things they should be happy for. For example, every day that I worked before I was a YouTuber, I thanked union activists back during the turn of the 20th century who gave us the 5-day work week, the 40-hour work week, who ensured that we...
I'll point out I've cheated and read this, and I disagree that it can't be considered an economic system per se, because you can expand the gift-giving aspect to literally just working to supply things that you could use to benefit society. In essence, whenever we give grants to colleges and they develop like vaccines and shit and new medicines and new technologies, they're not doing it for a profit motive, and they hand it over to the government to do things with. That's a form of gift, because it's supposed to be used for the betterment of society. And so that is gifting. You are gifting them this thing that you've created for them to be able to do good in society. So I've already read over this, so I understand where some of the flaws in the critiques are. And there's reasons that I think gift economics would be far better, or gift culture. But I mean, economics implies that there's like some form of a currency or whatever, but it doesn't have to.
had proper
Because it's just the study of resources changing hands, so or the process of resources changing hands.
standards for lunch breaks and what have you in this. And they fought and they were whiny, and I'm sure a lot of them had really bad ideas besides the worker activism. But we all benefited from that.
Do you ever think that as an activist, as a progressive, a libertarian socialist, is there ever a point where the activism actually does much more harm than good, and the preservation of what already exists actually should be desirable?
I would say that's the case with black separatists. There are some people in this country, not all of them are black, of course, but who believe that the racial problems between white and black Americans are irreparable, and that the best solution would be for black Americans to leave, or at the very least to form separate enclaves within this
And that's
country.
nothing new, just so you know.
I don't think
Oh,
that's
no,
what
it's very old.
I think that's. I don't think that's what Charlie asked. He asked you if there. Do you want to rephrase?
Yeah, so...
Sorry if I misunderstood.
Well, you were in the general area, but I guess the question is a heavy emphasis on activism for activism's sake, mobilizing for grievances. What if actually what we have as a constitutional order is actually...
Just so you know, this Chris Seawolf is a known Nazi. Boogaloo in the sphere of Zach and Tim Teagan. Yeah, see here they've got final solution shit up here. An appropriate cure, a solution, if you will. Boom. This is the black sun put to the trans flag. I think that's the trans flag. I'm not 100% sure. I don't know all the flags. I can't keep flags straight. I don't even know the flags of the countries. Fuck it. This is another black sun. Then you've got, a Nazi text-based game series being made, run on Windows. Chris Seawolf is a Nazi, and then you've got this shit. I don't think he makes music anymore. Not sure though. I've always liked his music. And then George Floyd, yeah, he wasn't too bad. The didn't do nothing memes. Where'd Echo Levitz go? Don't let him out of your sight. Like shit like this. Oh, and then Zach is, just so you know, Zachary Doherty, aka Zach, aka Magnus Pravidia. Born August of '92, so he's a little bit older than I am. And this is the company he's keeping. Oh, and let's look at this. No toilet paper, no problem. Here's a collage of tapestries that are ass approved to wipe your ass. Well, I don't know why you put butt. Trump, because a lot of them don't actually like Trump. Then you got the Confederate flag. The Nazi flag. Like I don't believe that they actually think that this is, a flag that they would use to wipe their ass. Nazi flag. Yeah, I don't think that that's a thing that he actually disagrees with either. The thin blue line flag, pretty sure he doesn't disagree with that. I do think that he disagrees with these three. The Trump flag, because Trump was an idiot. The anti-fascist action flag, because he doesn't like anti-fascists. And the communist flag, because he doesn't like communists. The Red Guard looks down and weeps. We have better material conditions than they did, Magnus. If you actually knew anything about fucking socialism, then you may know. You may know that. Oh my god, yeah, people are being ridiculous.
Depending on which news source you read, the economy is either doing better than ever and everyone is super excited recovery is here at last, or we're on the verge of a major economic catastrophe. Now, I am of the personal opinion, based on all the stories and the sources I have for you today, that we are facing a very serious economic crisis It can be averted, but it would seem the only options we have are to kick the can down the road and hope that we can keep kicking the can down the road. My friends, the U.S. debt ceiling limit has been reached. Congress has not raised the debt ceiling, which means the U.S. cannot take on any more debt to pay off its obligations and may be on the verge of a default for the first time in like 100 years or something to that effect. The effects of which are unknown. Most experts can't really give us a general idea of what would happen if we do default, but most seem to agree it would mean chaos in the global markets. It could mean recession, depression. One company doesn't get the money that it's owed by the U.S. government, which triggers a loss of confidence because the U.S. government can't pay off its debts, and then everyone kind of freaks out. You see, the debt ceiling was suspended in 2019. It was frozen around $22 trillion. I guess what they're saying now is that because we're at like $28 trillion in national debt and the suspension ended, that's the limit. And Congress has to approve the U.S. taking on even more debt. At the same time this is happening, we have the end of the eviction moratorium, which means millions of people are going to get kicked out of their apartments and maybe even their homes, and homes may be foreclosed upon. So we have the it is the king of economic scares, to put it mildly. Now, there's a couple things that may happen. Congress may rush in and then lift the debt ceiling, giving the U.S. government the ability to take on more debt, pay off its debts. But right now, the U.S. is liquidating assets to get the cash it needs to maintain it or to pay off its debts. We're at the point where the United States is selling stuff on Craigslist effectively. I'm joking, but have you ever been in one of those positions where you're like, I don't have any money, so it's time to sell the old guitar because I got to pay rent? That's kind of where we're at now. If Congress comes in and raises the debt ceiling, then we just take on more national debt. They'll borrow money from somewhere, they'll issue bonds, and then they'll get that money to pay things off. But the bonds work so long as people have confidence in the U.S. government. Those bonds will be paid back. They're kicking the can down the road. Plus, when it comes to the moratorium on evictions, if they extend the moratorium to December 31st, if Congress gets together and does this, well, then they're still just kicking the can down the road, and maybe that's the best we can do, or at the very least, it gives you some time to figure out what you need to do. But while this is happening, we're also hearing some scuttlebutt. Jack Posobiec says a White House official is saying that they are working on language about another national lockdown. Of course, Dr. Fauci says that's not going to happen. But considering what China is doing, locking down, the military being deployed in Sydney, I am of the opinion, boy, is it gonna get bad. And then eventually, I guess, when the next year, you will own nothing and you will be happy. There are shortages across the board. They're getting worse. Every time I do a segment on the economic issues that are happening right now, I can show you all of these stories about the economic crisis. But the big question right now is what's going to happen with the Delta variant? Because the reason we're in this mess to begin with is because we locked down 15 days to slow the spread. What if I were to tell you they are firing nurses because the nurses aren't getting vaccinated? And many nurses are protesting, saying they refuse. At the same time, there is a nursing shortage in many of these areas. It seems insane. There's one photo where nurses saying heroes during the pandemic, and now they're being, tossed out. And this is just some areas. But I'll tell you this: if we're supposed to get out of guilty, to take a working class individual who is accused of shoplifting before he's even been proven of guilt, lock him up for several months, he loses his job. However, what do we see in San Francisco?
Holy shit! There was literally nothing. What the fuck?
Mm-hmm. Wave of shoplifting, businesses shutting down because when you don't stop the crime, you get, I guess, a lot of crime.
Yeah.
Okay. So do you see this right here? This is a Telegram channel, a Boog Telegram channel. Dalton Double Deuce from Satanic Aryanism. These are all BLM group chats. I encourage you to raid these Bolshevik chats to bring glory to our cause. And then that last line there. Please note the Nazi language. Okay. And then we can come down here. Help me find my friends, and then friend zone, born to friend. Friends, we're almost at a very important amount of subs, 1488. I would love some help from the society we live in to reach that number. We also love a screenshot when it hits, just in case one of the admins doesn't see. Boogaloo, how to survive. Zach and the Michigan Boog have both lied about their intentions and activities. Zach and the Michigan Boog have organized with militias intent on kidnapping elected officials. Zach and the Michigan Boog traffic in Nazi language and imagery. Zach and the Michigan Boog often traffic with groups that end up practicing terrible OPSEC and are ultimately apprehended by law enforcement. Zach and the Michigan Boog value property in opposition to human life. Zach and the Michigan Boog have financial dealings with fascists. So, this is all extraordinarily good information to have for when I bring the Boogaloo Boy onto my stream. And I'm going to be very civil, I'm going to be very nice, and I'm going to point all of this out and go, hey, there's all these fucking leaks. There's stuff up with Nazi rhetoric and black suns and, some fucking, hailing of Hitler going on and some echo posting, conflating Nazis and commies and anti-fascists together, making fun of trans people, attacking anti-ICE protesters outside of the Holocaust Memorial, working with these other fascists, choosing private property over human lives, or saying that you choose both being equally important, which is a cop-out and is not feasible. Why we aren't left or right. No, you're definitely fucking right, okay? This just proves it to me, because I told the guy I have some faith that he wasn't going to be lying to me, and he actually did. He did fucking lie to me. And I knew this. But better to be civil. So just so you know, all of this stuff. And there's even Boogaloo Report 4/3/2021. Occupy for Anthony event. Okay, and so there's a whole fucking... What does that look like? Oh, Boogaloo and United Pharaohs card. Huh. So you can't even call it a Red-Brown Alliance. They call themselves anarchists because they want to appeal to my group, the anarchists. Because we're super far left. They go, oh, well, we're anti-state and stuff. But no. They're like, but we beat up the fascists. Well, then you need to beat up your own fucking leadership. Because if this guy's not lying to me about his views,
it's
then
a tough issue. I want to.
He's been duped.
What you guys?
I think we'll totally disagree on this. You first.
Maybe. Well, I've read a lot on recidivism. We have a fairly high recidivism rate in this country because really the thing that causes crime more than anything else, it's not actually poverty, it's income inequality. When poor people and rich people share the same space, it leads to a lot of problems. All poor people together in a neighborhood, what is there to steal? Poor people and rich people together in a neighborhood, there you go. You have very clean targets. And what's more, there are other forms of criminality that only really fully express themselves in the types of neighborhoods that have a really strong mix of wealthy and poor. I could see that because, again, from where I grew up, I lived on the border of a lot of low-income communities. Now, Beverly Hills, safest place you could be. 3 a.m., you want to take a joke, go for it. Seriously.
Not anymore.
Maybe. Oh, I haven't been there in like 5 years.
You'd be surprised, man.
I'll say this.
Good luck walking Rodeo Drive now.
Well, okay, first on, I don't want to walk Rodeo Drive during the daylight, okay?
Well, I agree.
I agree.
But
yeah.
After Garcon has had his work in L.A., it's a disaster.
Violent crime is down since the 90s. We've had a bit of an up since COVID.
But massive in the last year.
Oh, well, COVID's led to a lot of really weird exigent factors.
Well,
but
defunding the police.
We haven't defunded the police anywhere.
Minneapolis?
Maybe in a couple places.
A lot of places.
Hold on a second. That's not true. Minneapolis, Portland, Seattle, they've all cut police budgets.
be
260 departments, I think it was reported last year, had stripped their funding from
Sorry,
departments.
when you said defund, I thought I meant like the anarchist vision of like community policing. When it comes to police funds being stripped, there is a conversation to be had about the relationship between that and crime. But the crime increase seems to be all countrywide, so I don't know if I'd be leaning more towards that being a COVID thing and people being restless and angry and I don't know, aggressive. The thing that I'm trying to say though is when I grew up in Beverly Hills, really, really safe, free from violent crime. I could walk half a mile, though, and the area between rich and poor were the areas where people had barred windows. Every time. So when it comes to criminality, there are things that we can address very fundamentally that will help everyone. I'm sure there are restructures to bail laws that we could do. I don't know the particulars. It's not my field. I've also read stuff on recidivism. Apparently, murder actually has a very low default recidivist rate because usually it's done under a very specific set of heated conditions that don't actually speak to a person's character, which makes you wonder a lot about like moral worth and what really drives a person to do that sort of thing. I think it's something we should look at critically, though I don't have any really strong data-based arguments. The last thing I want to say, because it's the first point that you brought up, is racial responses to the criminal justice system. Yeah, I didn't forget. I'm actually going to triple down on this one, okay? Not only do I think that we should aggressively look at the ways our sentencing laws affect and discriminate between black and white people and Hispanic and Asian, I think we should do the same between men and women. Because as much as black people are shafted by the criminal justice system, men are even more. If you take a look at the disproportionate rates of sentencing, relative levels of implicit bias in the jury, women get off with way more than men
Vaush
do.
MRA confirmed.
Way more. So, I mean, maybe it's something we can all agree on. We're guys, I think.
Well,
know?
so the issue, though, is that when you remove race, it's just a matter of income or wealth. For example, if LeBron James goes in front of a jury, he's going to have the best lawyers. Mm-hmm. And obviously that's an extreme example, right? But O.J. Simpson had an all-star team. And so the problem is that
Obama. He would also have good lawyers.
O.J. Simpson?
Oh,
yeah.
Obama.
No, sorry. I was going to say, you didn't have Obama as a lawyer.
No,
Well, let me just say,
Kardashian and Dershowitz.
I would just like to interject that Obama.
Holy shit. Okay, you see this Aleister Crowley motherfucker? I believe they were actually the person who kicked me out of the anti-Vaush group. Who the fuck is this? Oh. Don't care. So, we are sitting right now at, and then Zachary Clark. I've actually argued with Zachary Clark. I was kicked out of a leftist group by Aleister Crowley here. Like, Jesus Christ. And they're doing this whole COVID denial. Oh my God.
This crisis.
This was proven
and
bunk like
we
the
have
day
a
it
labor
came
shortage, a nursing shortage, a food shortage, a political crisis. It doesn't seem to be going too well for us. Now, I'm not trying to say it's the end of the world. These are just some stories. Like I mentioned, there are many stories that are saying everything is better than ever. So it's up to you to figure out what's best for you and what makes the most sense. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, constantly bringing up all these negative articles and everything, but perhaps this would just help you remain resilient. Be calm. Try and sort through this stuff. Like I said, some articles say the economy is recovering, the labor shortages are temporary, and that may be the case. But for now, we've got a couple other big issues on our hands. The debt ceiling, which has always been lifted, so maybe that will happen. And we've got the moratorium on evictions ending. Well, let's read this news and see exactly what's going on, and I will break down for you what the debt ceiling means. Before we get started, head over to timcast.com, become a member to get an ad-free experience on the website as you read our articles, but you'll also get access to our exclusive members-only content, of which right now is segments from the Timcast IRL podcast.
Right, which is
but
how
we
many
are going to be
excuses
launching a couple new shows. We've
for
got a
reason
new
we've tried
show
UBI
on
and
mysteries
crime
and
Well,
spooky stories, true crime,
hold
things
on,
like
wait,
that.
hold on,
And
wait,
now
wait,
we're
wait,
putting
so we
together
need to
a
reject this
Dungeons
very
and
check.
Dragons show
People
that will explore different
crimes.
scenarios and
Hold
how
on, this is a
these
spurious
ideas
correlation, okay?
relate to
First of
modern
all, you will not
politics.
be able to
Oh my God.
they won't commit the crime. So people got money and they still committed crimes.
Yeah, but it doesn't always like correspond one-to-one like that.
I
The reason
totally
why people
agree.
needed money is because they weren't getting any money from their jobs because they couldn't work their jobs. So people were still in a worse
Well,
position.
they also
than
got
would have been otherwise.
Remember, very generous unemployment.
The unemployment started
plus
pretty generous.
$600 to $800 right? I think it was a week or a month, right? It was
It's
very
still
generous.
currently
that
a
run through,
$300
and not
bonus.
everyone is applicable for unemployment. There are a lot of conditions there that can make that difficult.
No,
to
they were
apply
very
for.
generous. They didn't
Well,
turn
hold on,
anyone
wait,
down
wait.
during
we're,
the lockdown.
We're
So
very,
that's-
we're being very spurious with our.
well, we're very
correlations
wonky.
right now.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you. I'm just
So I just so
Good
where was I?
liquors.
something about some dead guy about how crime is helpful.
I love dead white guys. That's my. I actually don't know if Durkheim was white. So I'm not pro crime, not pro criminal here. I'm pro leniency only insofar as I believe it helps to lower our recidivism. Sometimes it finds that it does. For example, you're in prison for 20 years. What do you know? You know the inside of a jail cell. The environment in prison is very bad at encouraging people to get their life together when they get out. And that's why so many people, they get out of prison, they have 6 months on the street before they're back in. Sometimes it's because they want to go back in. Prison's all they know. They did a movie about that. Sorry.
Shawshank Redemption.
And it was a good movie.
It's a great movie.
Yeah, which only serves my point. But with regards to like being lax on crime or whatever, there are a couple of things I think we should all agree to. Okay, first of all, well, maybe we wouldn't. Drugs is bad. We need to stop locking people up for weed, just flat out. I think that drugs in general should be treated like a medical issue. Portugal did that. They decriminalized all drugs. So
There's conflicting data on Portugal, but fine.
it's pretty promising. So you take like heroin. Nobody wants to be on heroin, okay? If you're on heroin, in the fleeting moments you have in between your little sessions, you know something's up. So you treat that like a medical issue. Say, hey, we have government offices. You want to come by. That helps. Far fewer overdose deaths. And those people, they go ahead, they become socially productive. Bam. No crime. They contribute to the economy. It just works better than locking them up.
I wanted to say something you mentioned with UBI, you mentioned with the unemployment, the stimulus. First of all, we've actually had a really hard time hiring for specific work, like labor stuff, because nobody wants to work. And no joke, like I've been having conversations like every other day, like, can we find some people? And it's like, we can't find anybody. We got signs up and down all throughout the area where it's like, come in, open interviews.
So many.
We had over 800 flights canceled due to staffing shortages, and now we're facing fuel shortages because there's a trucker shortage. We're looking at this this unemployment stimulus thing where they're doing the $300 bonus. Now they're doing the child tax credit, which won't be for everybody. Mm-hmm. And we're seeing a correlation with massive job openings and people not taking these jobs.
I think it's phenomenal. Finally, the bargaining power is in the hands of the workers more so.
It's broken. Like the flights are shutting down. Nobody wants the jobs, even when they do increase the salaries.
So it's true, the flights are an issue. But here's what they don't tell you in the news briefs. So stock buybacks, something that many companies now do because of their decriminalization. The airline companies have spent an anomalous amount of their profits each year on stock buybacks to enrich their CEOs and shareholders rather than on hiring more pilots. It seems the issue here is this is a simple supply-demand issue. People need to raise their wages. You see these news stories from time to time where it's like, I raised my wage to $15 an hour and people showed up. And it's like, yeah, that is how economics works.
We had John Schnatter, Papa John, on the show, and he told us a story about a pizzeria where they were paying $35 an hour to some of their pizza cooks or bakers, because that was a line. He kept trying to find people, nobody would do it. He kept raising wages. Finally, he settled on $35 an hour. That means pizzas are going to basically more than double because the wage they were paying before was like $15, and now they're over double what they were paying in labor. Their labor costs go up. They have no choice but to charge substantially more for pizza. In the short term, within a month or so, that might have an impact on those pizza makers. But the ripple effect is going to slam into everybody. All of a sudden, the contractor can't afford to take his family out for dinner. He can't afford to buy the food he wants, because the base level costs are going to start going up. Then the landlords aren't going to be able to hire the maintenance crews to fix the buildings. The landlords are on fixed pricing, which they can't change, which then results in a brick wall, a collapse.
I just want to say, what we're having right now is an unprecedented economic shock. For a year, nobody worked, or very few people worked. And people got used to staying at home. And as the government should, it should have done more, but as the government should, it took care of them a little bit. You know, we have to ride this out. What are government funds for but riding us out through common crises? Better this than war. And now people are returning to work, and they're realizing work sucks. Work sucks everywhere. But in this country, compared to maybe some of our equally developed contemporaries, work really sucks. The work culture, our rate of overproductivity, Americans more than any other developed country, by the way, we push our workers hard. And you have favorable employment numbers, but you don't have favorable underemployment numbers. There are a lot of people who have jobs, but they have like 2 to 3 part-time jobs. They don't get their schedule for the next month until like 2 weeks before the end of the current one. They're constantly worrying about whether or not they're going to make their shifts line up to get enough hours to get the money they need to pay down their student debt along with their rent and everything. It sucks, and it's untenable, and we are in an era of unprecedented record profits for CEOs. So yes, I think the solution to this, and it'll be a rough one, that's for sure, is we should normalize higher wages. Maybe the solution to $15 an hour was never a federal mandate. Maybe it was the inevitable economic necessity of incentivizing workers.
Hard to disagree with a lot of that. I will say that the lockdowns were way too harsh and intense. I will say there is a Fifth Amendment argument to be made, though, that if the government forces you to not work, then you should be able to get something in return. The government cannot take something from you constitutionally and not pay you for it. That's the eminent domain argument, right?
Right.
Which was one of the best arguments for the stimulus package. I just think the lockdowns were far too severe and far too intense and really infringed on people's liberties and abilities to be able to take risks. I want to go a different direction. I just want to ask you a question. It's just more kind of about human nature.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think human beings are naturally good or naturally bad as human nature?
Tabula rasa. I really think we are what we make
Blank
people.
slate.
Mm-hmm. Maybe there's some inclination. We're hardwired to be social. I know that. We're also, at least to some extent, hardwired to be self-serving. The best society merges those two. The best interest for you is the best interest for everyone. The social contract, from now
So
until
which
we die.
Locke's, Rousseau's, or Hobbes? Which social contract?
I guess I would just say the ubiquitous philosophical term more so than
Well,
any
because
specific.
they all wrote on those terms, right?
Right,
And
and
they totally disagreed.
They
on
all
what that
thought
is.
different things of humans. They all thought
Hobbes was at a very dark view. Rousseau very positive. Locke was more neutral. I'm just curious.
Socialists tend to think that human beings are fundamentally positive, but I reject that.
That's why I'm
because-
curious, because you don't you see way too cynical for that.
Well, the implicit suggestion to that, to me, is that socialists think their system would only work if everyone was nice, and I don't believe that. I think that the best economic systems will work when everyone is an absolute POS, just a dirty, horrible human being, and
Very
you can
Hobbesian of
incentivize
you.
them. Well, but it should. Maybe humans are amazing, but the best systems should survive human greed.
I want to ask you a very simple and general question.
Uh-oh. Those are the worst ones to answer.
It is. Do you think some people are better than other people?
Can I add a bit of nuance to that answer?
Answer however you want.
I think that some people have been developed to be more moral and of better character.
Oh no. Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't mean moral.
Just better,
Just-
like they're taller.
That's it.
Oh,
However, but I think your interpretation of the question is part of the answer.
by any metric, there will always be people who are better than others. Always, perhaps by some combination of environment and genetics. I just hope that we can all ride along beside each other.
I agree. I think I mentioned this before the show. If you were to ask anybody on the left or the right, what did you want? It would be like for everyone to prosper, for people to be successful, to pull people out of poverty, things like that. I guess the issue is disagreeing on how we get there.
Well, I think I'm not sure if we want the same thing. I want more a preservation and a conservation of what we already have.
Do you want socialism?
Absolutely not.
Oh no, slight ideological.
No,
disagreement.
but come on.
I mean,
If-
but like
if I-
we
if I-
don't need to play the word games. Go
No,
ahead.
I'm
Tim.
Why
sorry,
do you
Tim.
want to preserve?
Well, I think that we have something beautiful, unique, and exceptional. And I take the more Hobbesian view of human nature, which is we're brutish and nasty and awful and cruel. And the fact that we've been
No.
able to build something decent and civil is
No, by nature, humans are a mixture of both, honestly, and don't apply a naturalistic fucking fallacy to your debates, okay? Humans can be either, and it takes social fucking conditioning to be one or the other, alright? By nature, I mean, yeah, when we were Neanderthals, we would club people over the head and drag them into a cave to have our way with them and shit, but we don't do that now, because society has developed, and we have made social bonds, okay? That's a psychological thing, Charlie. Once we started living in fucking little communities, we started engaging in mutual aid.
pretty remarkable.
But
And-
are you saying
Jesus
that we
Christ.
have a good system
A great system.
and people thrive from the system?
Yeah, I think people flourish and thrive. I think that a rights-based system is naturally the best way to govern.
Do you want people to be stripped of their rights, imprisoned, brutalized, impoverished?
Of course not. No. And I mean, the sacrificing of rights is something that usually has to be earned negatively, like murdering somebody.
So this is what I mean, because I think I could ask you the same question. Do you want people to be brutalized, impoverished, imprisoned,
Of course not.
taking their rights away?
But I would never want to grow complacent. You're both familiar with the Marxian theory of dialectic materialism.
You mean
correct?
Hegel's
I'm
theory.
Oh no, he had the dialectic, and we built on it, or he
We?
built.
I'd love to get into.
No,
I really want to get into the Marx thing because I'm
said
super
he.
fascinated by it.
no. I just want to say, the theory. I mean, put simply, I guess, is that human society, the human project, it evolves as a product of antagonism, grinding antagonism between people in Marxian view of different.
That's very Hegelian. Yeah.
Well, yeah, no. I mean, he was a student of Hegel.
I know he was part of this. He was the young Hegelian.
Yeah,
and he won
no.
the argument.
Well, no, I'm not. Well, you're not. I'm just saying, like, he would get mad at you if you said he was Hegelian influence, but I don't think I would. Hegel was a smart guy. I just can't read his work because.
The phenomenology of spirit is impossible to read.
Thank you. All right. I was worried you're going to make fun of me. I just want to say.
No, it's really hard. He made the
It's a
very
book.
simple complex.
Yeah. He was
We
very good
agree
at
on
that.
something.
I just want to say, sorry. I just want to, the project of humans moving forward, I think that antagonism fuels it, but in the best way. Not antagonism like war, but antagonism in the sense that we look at our ideas, our values, and we challenge them.
So I just want to say something we disagree on. I don't think humanity's a project.
Do you think we're headed towards something better than what we have today?
Probably not.
Oh.
I think that we're probably engaging in the second law of thermodynamics currently.
Oh my
that
God.
We're untangling. We're going to chaos, not order.
See, this to me, this is the thing, and I'm not trying to patronize. Conservatives have been shown to be more fearful on average, and I think if they thought that way, it would be very warranted.
But some fears are legitimate.
Certainly.
Winston Churchill's fears about the evil Germans were legitimate.
No, I'm not. No, fear is not always illegitimate, and there are elements of this. I think, though, that if society is to collapse, it would probably be from climate change more so than like the.
Oh, come on. You don't believe that.
No, for sure. You can. We'll see it, assuming COVID doesn't get you. We'll live to see some
Assuming.
pretty
You
severe.
hear that?
We see it right now.
You know, my problem is,
Oh,
I see all the news, I see all the arguments about climate change, and I'm like, I understand them. And then you get Obama buying beachfront property, you get the celebrities flying in airplanes, and I'm like, how am I supposed to trust any of
Bernie.
these people?
Got to get Bernie. Guy rode the train to work. He didn't have to do that. Bernie's the man.
True revolutionary. So,
Well, just to
Yeah,
finish
Bernie
the point. I'm sorry
was-
because I kept getting sidetracked.
but the idea of the human project is super interesting to me because that's a collision point we're going to have. So
Yeah, well, I'd like to think. I mean, people have always said this is the best it gets. The Postmaster General back in was it the Postmaster General? Or was it the Patent
No,
Office?
the Patent
Minister?
Office 1900. All the patents have been made.
Yeah, yeah,
And I'm
and-
not saying it's the best it's been. I'm not saying improvement is not possible.
Maybe we can
Don't get
make
me don't
little
get me-
improvements, but when I try to put myself in the shoes of men past, I don't know, somebody in feudal China, and to them, what I live in today would have been incomprehensible to them in every imaginable sense, every conceivable way. But their arguments for the permanence of society then would have been better than mine today because they would have lived in a stable feudal society for millennia. And today, I now am here using technology that would have been alien to humans 20 years ago.
I think about like the cultural revolution. I think about the revolution in Russia. And you mentioned the conservatives tend to be more fearful. And I think there's history that shows us things can go bad. You can have something that's good, not great, could probably be better, and then end up with an unchecked movement that results in millions dead.
For sure.
20 to 40 million, I think, in the Cultural Revolution. We had Lily Tong Williams on the other night, and she's telling us these stories are scary.
Always hindsight, right? Because people thought this about every major event in social progress in America's history as well. The breakup, the Confederacy, the Civil War, the fight to abolish slavery, sure. Suffrage for women, yes. The Civil Rights Act, yes. Gay marriage, yes. Every time we make a step forward, you're probably anti-gay marriage, right? Because are you?
I'm pro-traditional marriage.
Okay, sure,
Yeah.
right. Anti-gay marriage.
Pro-tradition. Yeah.
Gotcha. Every
Different
time,
definitions.
One man, one woman. Yeah.
every time we take a step forward, well, we agreed on the 3-parent household before.
I disagreed on
That was
polyamory, actually.
50% more efficient than the previous method.
And
That's
tw-
not
and-
actually
and,
a study,
and,
is it?
and 10 times more chaotic
are you actually
and
citing
way
something?
more perverse.
Possibly
I'm not
a
actually
Wow.
citing anything.
It's possibly not a linear growth pattern with
Yeah, maybe
parents
not.
in the house.
It's actually exponential. It just goes up forever.
Yeah, that's
Albert
very.
Einstein had 12 parents. It's
Yes.
just,
By the time you hit 12 parents,
Okay.
there should the children just a god, by the way. Just a
Yeah,
little
it's like the
glowing-
warp scale
very,
Star
very,
Trek.
very
It's-
Ubermensch, but continue, yeah.
Sorry. It always feels like everyone argues like this is the best it gets and any future steps would be treacherous, but then we always make that next step. I don't know if America's going to be around forever. We're a young country, and countries far older than ours have fallen in the lifetime of America. So I can't look at what we have today or the people that I live with or the values that I believe in and assign to them a feeling of permanence, but I can say this. I fear stagnation, and every country that has ever set itself upon stagnation has always died. Every time. Every country always seeks to better itself, and maybe that road to betterment leads to ruin, but the path of stagnation is always ruinous.
I agree. Our culture has stagnated severely. One thing I always bring up is like Christmas music written in the 50s. We still play it nonstop over and over again.
Thank you.
Movies have become repetitive, redundant, reboots. It's devolved from where we had these interesting pieces of art to just regurgitated crap over and over again.
Can I just take some exception with your argument? First of all, there is this kind of revisionist belief that somehow conservatives in the traditional sense were against some of those social movements, which is just not true. Now, I'm not saying you'd be a Confederate, and I'm not even getting to the party switching thing. But there is a direct lineage between hyper-focusing on racial politics in the 1860s and the 1920s and some of the people on the American left that are just completely obsessed with American, racial politics.
It's equality versus hierarchy, right?
But what do you mean by that?
Well, back then, the slave owners wouldn't have been like, I'm really obsessed with race. Well, equality. Now, obsession with race can be pernicious in many ways, but I think there's a pretty big difference between being obsessed with the idea of racial equality and being obsessed with
I think
racial
it's
domination.
equally as pernicious, just they don't have the power to implement it. But we kind of already did that.
Do you
whole
think
discussion.
I'd do that? Like
You? No, I don't think you would. I mean, I don't know you well enough. You seem rather decent.
I try my best.
But like I wouldn't give power to Nicole Hannah-Jones.
I don't know who that is.
She founded the 1619 Project.
Oh, I just read the thing. I don't know.
We have
much of the
we have a
meta-knowledge.
constitution to prevent us against people like that. What I'm saying though is that, for example, I'm not against social change. I mean, I'd love to abolish abortion, for example. I'd love to put fathers back in the home.
No doubt.
So conservatives are not necessarily always saying, no, we don't want to improve. We want to stagnate. We want the correct form of social change.
So let me ask this then. Let's get to the core of it then. What values are you looking to maximize?
This
Not
is
just
a great question.
Not just like morality, because that could mean the same thing or different things to anyone. But if you were to look at a society and were asked to assess its worth, what metrics would you look towards?
It's ability to defend those that can't defend themselves.
Okay.
Charity, generosity, integrity, faith to your creator, the ability to pass down good and moral values to the next generation, one that believes in work and one that believes in the cause of the nation above the self.
All right.
I've got an idea.
I think that's a
with
fairly collectivist point, that last one, though, wouldn't it be?
Well,
The nation above itself?
I mean,
Stalin
you could call it collectivist, but I wouldn't say the state. I'd say the idea of the nation, right? So there's two different things, and those are conflated sometimes by libertarian socialist types, which is a walking contradiction. I'd love to ask you about that.
Sure.
But just like it's kind of just being
I
like
might
a Christian
answer it.
atheist,
I
right?
might answer it when you're done, by the way, because
Yeah.
I think my follow-up might touch on that.
But the state is a creation of the people. The people are the country. That's why our Constitution, the preamble, says we the people, not we the federal government, right? So the people are the nation. And so that's why I differentiate between the two. Do you have a loyalty? Do you have a belief that you want to create something bigger than yourselves? I think that's a moral good.
To me, and I mean this without meaning to hyperbolize, but to me that's always strung rather fascist. The myth of the common man, the people, the Volk, the idea that there is a state, and Germany was a state, of course, but Hitler didn't really appeal to the state. It was the concept of the fatherland that he really hit on, and the people were a beating heart of the fatherland. They were an instrumental organ. And to me, the problem with this is that when you get down to it, this thought process, this mentality, it drives men to do terrible, terrible things. Because interpersonally, all of the chemical effects of empathy kick in. I look at you, I see you. But you start bringing in concepts like the nation, the fatherland, and it becomes very easy to convince people to compel themselves towards courses that they would otherwise not.
So expected you to use a 1930s reference earlier, so congratulations.
No,
'Cause
well,
it is-
I'm only
it's
saying,
just-
I'm not calling you a
and-
fascist.
and-
I'm only saying
no, I know
that
you did do the correct. I didn't mean to hyperbolize, but there's other nations today that have those values that we would never call fascist, like Japan. Japan has very strict immigration.
Well, I think Korea is actually a better example, to be honest.
I really don't like either of those countries for the reasons that
You
I've
don't like
described.
Korea?
I think they're both deeply conservative countries.
I
that-
agree with you.
Right.
They're
yeah.
wonderful.
And I think they do so in part because there's a degree of
Let's see if we can find some
anti-individualism
shit.
and the subservience they all expect of the common good. Now, it's funny. I feel like our roles are being reversed a little bit here.
Isn't
but
that interesting?
the common good isn't something I appeal to. For me, the value I want to
No,
maximize.
I just appeal to the good,
the good. Sure, the
which
good
is two different things.
is freedom. That's what I care about most. And that's what libertarian socialism is about. There are many types of freedoms, positive and negative. If I might indulge very briefly, like, is a man thrown to a lawless desert without food, water, or clothing free? I'm really asking.
So probably no.
I agree. He's free to die.
But that's an extreme example,
Sure.
not applicable in modern wealthy America.
No,
or
but-
any Western nation.
But it's a philosophical base.
It's also a Rousseauian argument. Man's born free, and he, spends the rest of his life in chains. It's
Right.
just anti-commercial in nature.
Well, no, but it's a base philosophical argument because it's true they're lawless. There's nothing preventing him from doing anything in that environment, but he has no ability to act on
But
his
do you know what he
desires.
does have? Consciousness.
Well, sure.
So that's a natural rights doctrine that I will defend.
Well, I mean, I like consciousness too. The only point that I'm getting at is when it comes to people's freedom and the ability for people to protect their freedom, this is what I care about. It's what Marx cared about. If you actually read what he wrote, and
I have. I've read Das Kapital. I've read the Manifesto.
Then
And guess what? He was right about some things.
then you know.
But not everything.
He didn't
And
talk
he was really wrong
about equality. He didn't write on equality. He wrote on freedom because he believed that society was a very complex, interlocking network of systems that in some ways liberated men and in other ways enslaved them.
But do you know what he got wrong? He got wrong that sometimes people can be free for other devices that they are not able to regulate. They could be free not from alcoholism, drug addiction, some sort of any other sort of perverse addiction. The idea of freedom is a very libertarian.
But I
view of
agree with
freedom.
that, though.
No, I
So
know you do.
the
I-
greatest society.
I say that. Okay, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Just the greatest society is one where a man is born and there are as few things as possible preventing him from doing whatever he wants for the rest of his
I
life,
totally disagree.
so long as, of course, he doesn't deprive others of the ability to do the same.
So I think that's a miserable society.
Freedom?
No, that's not freedom. That's licentiousness or degeneracy. That's chaos.
What is degeneracy? I like men.
How about pedophilia?
Okay. Well,
You
obviously
said
that would
whatever
infringe-
he wants. Is
as long as
pedophilia
they don't-
freedom, Vouch?
As long as they don't infringe on the rights of others. I'm sure you could believe. I would believe.
Well,
that
so
infringes on the
there
rights of
are
others.
limits on freedom, is what you're saying. It's not this Wild West
Yeah, well,
campaign.
as
So
long
where do you
as you-
get those limits from?
Well, obviously, you would probably have to have a pretty complex interlocking legal
up
system
here.
to determine what we agree upon as like a reasonable limits we can place on people's behavior. We have that now to an extent.
No, I know. So like pedophilia, bad.
that
right?
would be a bad thing.
Okay, kidnapping,
That would be a bad thing.
rape.
That would be a bad thing.
Why do you think those things are bad?
I think they're bad because you're stripping other people of the ability to do that which they will. With all those examples, you're inflicting harm on a person.
How about dealing drugs?
I think that dealing drugs is a person's freedom, as is taking a
But
person's.
you're taking
What
some-
about dealing drugs to kids?
Dealing drugs to kids. I think I would disagree with that, probably because I think there's something exceptional about addictive substances and children. That being said, I think a lot of stuff would apply to children specifically. Contract law. Kids can't sign contracts,
So
but there's nothing wrong
do you see what
with
I'm getting at?
contracts.
Eventually, you do agree that a conservative framework is necessary.
But I don't think that's a conservative framework because there are other things I care about that you would always disagree with, like collective ownership of the means of production.
Yeah, I totally disagree.
Which-
I think private property and freedom are linked together.
which
Here's-
would give workers the most freedom possible.
We've definitely gone along because it was just
But this has
so
been
it was
helpful,
fantastic.
right?
It was
It
fantastic.
feels like it's been 5
Oh
minutes.
yeah, I know.
I
We
know,
can keep
right,
going.
right. And Ian, you've collected a bunch.
I knew I heard the name Christopher Ledbetter before. I live in Oklahoma, and he was a boog who was arrested in Oklahoma with like machine gun shit. And yeah, no, he was apparently attacking people.
of
Right.
great.
50, yeah, at least.
So right.
I'm going to use the restroom. Is that okay?
Away.
All right, yeah, go do it
It's
to
going
it.
to take like 100 seconds.
Yeah.
You can time me.
I'm kind of interested what you think about. I think humans are inherently destructive by nature, and that if you took a human and put him in a room with a bunch of small animals and plants, over time, his hunger, purely because of hunger, ultimately, he would destroy and consume all of those animals and all of those plants. And then if you put another human in there, one of those would eventually destroy and consume the other human.
I do think that we are maybe inherently expansionist. I think that might be a defining trait of our species.
Life.
It's we conquered the world, and God willing, we survive. 1,000 years from now, we'll conquer the stars, and that's unique to us. Other animals don't do that. I don't know if that's a good thing. Maybe everything would have been better.
They do this. Every animal does. The issue is
Build
that
spaceships?
no. Expansion.
Oh, yeah. But
Not build spaceship. That'd be cool though. Dolphins taking off.
over time, the limits of their abilities constrain them to a given area, a given population. But we clearly haven't been kept in that way.
Intelligence
We're
has
too
separated
smart.
us from that from the equilibrium. A lion chasing a gazelle. The gazelle runs.
Oh, and notice they're trying to kill him. Help! And he just got arrested.
Runs faster. The lion has to run faster. The zebras and the stripes are confusing. Some get away, some don't. There's a natural adaptation process. We know what evolution is. But humans, we adapt instantly. We are like, hey, that bird's flying. I got an arrow.
And we have, and there are. I just want to say, we're talking about evolution.
Yeah, not controversial
That's
topic.
quick.
No,
Yeah.
no. Well, in a non-controversial way, believe it or
Yes.
not, you'll have to catch the behind-the-scenes release. I just want to say that I don't have much optimism for the human condition. I'm not like a huge optimist about this. We are, I think, very potentially destructive. I just think that we also experience, or we're better receptive to reward incentives than any other thing.
Ian's got a bunch of questions.
Yes.
So for
Yeah.
everybody who's super chatted, we were having Ian. We mentioned in the beginning. Go through and try and find really good questions. A lot of people are saying really awesome things. I want to read one that's not a question real quickly. It's from Adam Schrader, who said, "So far, this whole conversation reminds me of friendly bar discussions 10 years ago. I miss that world. Thank you, Vaush and Charlie, for being excellent. Thank you, Tim, for steel manning. You all have leader demeanors." I know a lot of people disagree with each other, especially in the chat. Not everyone gets along, but these are. I think it's a fantastic conversation.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Charlie.
Ian's got some questions.
Let me bring them to you.
And then afterwards, if we still have time permitting, I would like to do the member segment and then personally be more involved than I've been for the most part.
Sorry, we've been.
Well, no, that was kind of the point.
Back to
Yeah.
arm
There's
wrestling.
There's a
you know.
million things. I'm like, and I did interject. You guys know I did.
Just toggle to the right to go through all of them.
Thanks, Ian.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you, Ian.
these are some pretty good ones. So you just said press. Okay, there we go. So Ian's pulled some super chats. M asks, please ask each guest if they agree or disagree with the statement. Abortion breaks the non-aggression principle and why.
I mean, obviously, yeah. I think abortion is immoral, and we should do our best to eradicate it.
I don't really believe in the NAP. I understand people's discomfort with abortion. I think that unfortunately it's a legal necessity as a byproduct of some very compelling personhood arguments I've heard in the past, which
I'm not really able to cover this. I do think Vaush does need to go a little bit more aggro overall, but his approach is doing really fucking well. Charlie's trying to hammer on these points, but what Vaush has said about him already, Charlie's trying to hammer him over and over by saying them over and over again. But anyone who's listened to Charlie Kirk before, especially the thing with Sam Cedar, is saying something over and over again doesn't make it true. Vaush just stated his thing once. He's like, this is what it is. And it sounds more feasible. Like, he's already cracked down on all of this. So I will finish watching this at a later point, probably. But tonight's research has gone pretty fucking deep. All right, it's 2 hours in. I am tired. I actually need to go get my wallet. So I hate to say it, but I'm gonna have to dip on out. I truly, like, absolutely appreciate you all tuning in. Like, quite seriously, you have no fucking clue. And we hit the 51 sub mark, by the way. All thanks to you all. Hey. Have you ever wanted to join up in a Discord server that was named after fucking condiments? Well, welcome to the Condiment Crew. You're watching Sandwich Pants, and I started a group of my friends who I tried to bring over to my ideology, and I've been pretty successful at. We are now the Condiment Crew as a collective. That is my collective. Triple C's, yo. The Condiment Crew collective. So if you want to join the Condiment Crew, follow me on fucking Twitter, okay? And then DM me if you ever want to come on and talk or whatever. Nick, I know I didn't bring you on. I do have work tomorrow. I left my wallet at my job. I have to go back there and get it because stuff, reasons, and things. So I'm gonna do that. Actually, you know what? Here, I'll go after I finish this thing. Because I want to smoke some fucking weed. But, hey, Froge, I really do appreciate you sending me all this. This is some great shit. All I gotta say is, you just need this, and these, Magnus Panvidia over here with the 1488 shit. Saying, yeah. And we have their fucking Discord logs. Do you see this? This website right here? Browse the Citizens Liberty Organization Discord leaks. This, Left Coast Right Watch. This is all archived information. And then, yeah, let's just go here to member chat. Let's see what's going on here. Jesus Christ. Better spent on gear and training. Yeah, apparently not. Using that shit for running Colombian sugar. Okay. Yeah. Um, the whole net has been infiltrated. That's absolutely true, Slur 38. Nothing is truly encrypted except for iPhone. They can't even get into your iPhone. Only your phone is encrypted. They can get your anything that goes into the internet. If it touches the fucking internet, they can get it. I think there's literally no way unless we have our own fucking satellite. Yep. Look at that. Dunkalib. Deleted user. Slur38 became a deleted user. Huh. Keybase is secure, huh? Oh, the deleted user is the person who was I don't see, was it Riot? We're just kind of going through. Hey, guess what? I don't have to make fake accounts or anything. Because I feel like I can affect political change and social change without advocating for things that are, going to get the feds watching me constantly. I'm stuck with Signal since Snowden vouched for it. Well, guess what? Signal is not 100% secure. Like Swiss products. Isn't Switzerland having to deal with a swath of white nationalism right now? They're also ethnically homogenous. or like Swiss products. They don't like our government. So, so yeah. Oh, so dot dot same person. I like Swiss products. They don't like our government. So, the Swiss. Wait. Okay. I need to find this. Probably not going to be in any of these fucking general chats, is it? This is the public relations. Oh god. The LARP. I've heard this before. Yeah, the libertarian flag. Okay. The Confederate battle flags. Jesus Christ. Okay. Well, we don't know for sure if those are real boogs or false flag boogs waving around the racial shit. And before you jump my ass, I know there is more to the CBF than that, but it is a divisive symbol these days. Oh my god. See, this J.V. Baker guy needs some tweaking, but a good starting point. So for the nationalism, against the nationalism, and then agrees because his friends are there. It's a butt plug. That's it. And not assume we are radical. We need to plan for after the tree has been refreshed. Otherwise, we will be seen as bad folk who want to do bad things. Of course, that means we're going to need to agree on a basic outline of a plan before writing about it. We could also definitely use some artist types, musical dudes, entertainer types who believe as we do and can get the message out in a more palpable way. I think he meant palatable way than blanketing the net with essays. I'm not on board with a return to the Constitution at fucking all. I'm not on board personally with our current Constitution necessarily every way that it stands. There are some aspects of it I like, and there's some aspects that I think are fucking horrendous. So, okay. Yeah, I definitely need to. No, it's not a type of socialism, you fucking idiot. Okay. No. God. Like, we don't want to be seen as right wingers, and then they just say all the dumb shit. Hey, I don't see anything about authoritarianism. I see them conflating socialism and government, which is very much ignorant of what socialism actually is. None of these people are actually anarchists. Nothing I see here is anarchism. They just, I mean, yes, they want to destroy the state. That's not anarchism. Almost none of these people are mutualists, which I don't even consider mutualism to be anarchism now having read on it. Jesus Christ. I definitely need to go and get my wallet though. So I will be back. You guys are wonderful. Take care.